powerlessness and helplessness. The government gives them the drugs, builds bigger prisons, passes a 3-strike law, and then wants us to sing God Bless America. No, no, no. Not God Bless America. God damn America. That's in the Bible for killing innocent people. God damn America for treating us citizens as less than human. God damn America as long as she tries to act like she is God and she is supreme.
All right. Fuck it, Roth. I guess this isn't really technically hardcore AndersLee because it's not really history.
Well, sort of.
I guess it's recent history.
Yeah.
Everything is, I suppose.
History's all around us all the time.
I'm touching it right now. Okay.
It is a Kratom corner, though. I like that one.
No
better.
more, man. I fucking took a little dip into your world, and I didn't feel right.
Did you throw up?
No, I didn't throw up. Riley threw up. I didn't feel terrible, but I also didn't really feel much. I only got the weird euphoria immediately. I don't think I need more. Oh, God, it also tasted so bad.
Yeah, you got to mix it with stuff. I have pineapple juice in this. It actually tastes pretty good.
Yeah. Weren't you, like, throwing up, like, when you first were doing it?
I've thrown up a few. I mean, it happens. You just got to...
No. That isn't something you just casually go...
You never throw up from... You don't throw up from alcohol?
No, I'm not a puker, man. I wish I was, because, like...
Well, then maybe you won't throw up from this.
Well, every time I get, like, too fucked up on booze, I wish I could throw up, but I just have such a fucking bad, like... I don't have a gag... Or I have a gag reflex, like the... I don't have enough of one to where it makes me throw up or something. I can't. I usually can't, and then I just feel sick. And I can't do that shit where you, like, stick your finger down your throat. That's, like, weird alcoholic shit where you're just like, all right, time to go to work, blah. Every once in a while I'll puke if I have really bad allergies and my throat's closed up and I try to do a shot and it goes down the wrong, like, pipe.
Oh, yeah.
I'll just, like, immediately have to run to a fucking toilet or something. But I don't enjoy it. It's always funny, but I don't, generally kind of it sucks.
Well, this you feel pretty good, like, right after you throw up. Like you just... you're just back to normal. Where with alcohol, you're fucking... Blah. And you're still high from it, too. It still feels good.
It's after, even if you puke, you're still high from the kratom?
Not as high, but depending on how long ago you took it. What I learned I have to avoid is drinking a bunch and then eating right after, because then you throw up. But if you wait a few hours, it feels really good to eat, and you feel very relaxed. Or if you have food before, you do it on a full stomach, then you feel good.
If you had to describe what kratom feels like to a non-kratom person, like what would you say?
Like you're ejaculating out of every pore of your body at the same time.
You said that immediately.
That's my pitch.
So that's why. Okay, I mean that's pretty convincing.
Yeah, we got to get the stuff from the guy who was offering.
Oh yeah, it's on my to-do list.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna email him.
Cool.
But
if there's a way you could do it express, because I got to leave in a little over a week.
You sound like a junkie.
I am. But a good junkie. On a good, I'm going to a country where I don't know if any customs authorities in the UK are listening, but they have banned my preferred substance to oppress me, and I
gotta a picture of you at the airport and shit?
Yeah. Like, this guy likes having too much fun.
Okay, well, yeah. I will email our fans who hit us up about kratom, and I'll blow up there. Once I remember their names, I'll advertise their company. And hopefully we'll get that in time for you to get your fix and go be a junkie.
What was I going to say? Oh, AndersLee. You know about the other AndersLee?
No.
Haven't I told you about this?
No.
There is another AndersLee from Minnesota who is my same age, class of 09 from high school, who was a hockey and football star. So I've been hearing about this guy since I was 14 years old. He was a freshman at the St. Thomas Academy hockey team, and he was like an MVP as a freshman. Went on to become a very successful quarterback at Edina High School. gets drafted into the NHL right as I'm about to move here by the New York Islanders.
Whoa.
So he has followed me. This
weird.
parallel AndersLee has followed me from Minnesota to New York, and he just fucking re-signed. So I have to be, and I've been hearing about him for over 10 years.
Whoa. I don't really like my own name because it's like, I don't know, I'm just one of those people. But there are a lot of people with my name in Texas because there's a shit ton of Flores, and like a lot of Mexican people are Catholic and they name their kids just shit from the Bible.
Yeah.
So there was the other Jake Flores. I've told this story in a couple podcasts, so I'll just like be brief about it. But there was a website called Help Jake Flores Walk. It was just about a guy like got in an accident, and it was like really weird Googling myself and then going like, am I gonna fuck with this GoFundMe?
Yeah, you made a mistake by going with feral jokes on Venmo.
Well, the reason
gotten this.
The reason I should have went with help Jake Flores Walk.
Right.
I went with the reason I had to come up with this like anagram thing is because my website got stolen by Dan Ninen. I'm pretty sure. Like I can't prove it, but he does someone called me and then told me, I've acquired your domain name and I'm interested in selling it back to you for $800. And I told him to suck my dick and I hung up the phone. And then years later, I heard that Dan Ninen does that to comedians. He just like waits for them to not be able to pay for their domain names so that he can try to send it back to them. So I'm pretty sure it was him. And I went, fuck you, I'll just come up with something else instead.
Yeah.
I got creative and I really liked it, so I kept it. But also, there was another guy born in the same hospital as me on the same day named Jacob Flores, right? And I didn't find out about this until I applied for like student loans and shit to go to college.
Right.
And I went to UTSA, right? So I was born in San Antonio. I grew up in Houston. I went back to San Antonio for college, right? And then I was involved in this long thing where I was like trying to track down my actual birth certificate because like something didn't match, like my social security number on my birth certificate didn't match or something like that. Anyway, like a year later, I figured out that me and this dude's social security numbers got switched, or our birth certificates got switched. Something got switched, and then I tracked him down, and it turns out at one point, neither of us knowing this, we lived in the same apartment complex in the same unit. I was upstairs and he was downstairs.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's fucking crazy, man.
So you could have been like, hey, I'm not behind on rent, just paid it.
Yeah, probably. Anyways, we should talk about this book, man.
Yeah. Yes. We've Got People. Not We Got People, which I thought it was. I was looking for it in the bookstore, and I was like, We Got People, and there's a apostrophe VE after the WE. This is a book I was very excited to read. I'm already pretty far into it. I got it. Actually, based on the appearance of this book, how long would you say I've owned it?
Oh, that looks beat up, dude. That looks like you, I'd say, that's like a good year.
3 days.
Wow, dude.
This is what it's like to be
Just
owned by AndersLee.
Kratom.
Yeah.
And vomit.
Yeah, I got to work on this. Sorry to all the librarians I've wronged over the years out there listening. But this is a book I've been waiting for something like this for a very long time. It's about the history of progressive movements trying to infiltrate the Democratic Party or trying to use the Democratic Party, be Democrats, take over the Democratic Party, that relationship, that dynamic.
Sure.
And it's by Ryan Grimm, who is now I think the chief politics reporter for The Intercept, and for a long time wrote for Huffington Post. And he has written this book, which some say has sparked somewhat of a controversy. Maureen Dowd, who we talked about last week on the show, has sort of really, she's the one who sparked this quote-unquote civil war in the Democratic Party because she interviewed Pelosi and printed her little jab at the squad. But she is blaming Grimmy for writing this book and sparking the Civil War, which ended in Trump tweeting racist shit about these four awesome congresswomen.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, but she says So they're in kind of a spat right now, I guess. But she's basically relying on the old trope, which he really debunks pretty thoroughly in this book, that the Democrats can't go too far to the left politically or legislatively, or they will lose big.
Yeah.
And this is in response to him. Maureen Dowd writes, frustration with the refusal to stand up for principles is boiling over among younger Democrats on issue after issue: impeachment, Medicare for all, minimum wage, Green New Deal. The answer from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and other Democratic leaders is consistent. Now is not the time. The country isn't ready. Push too far, too fast, and there will be a backlash. Oh, wait, this is Ryan Grimm responding to Maureen Dowd. And so she's, just relying on this old trope, which really goes back a while, but the starting point that Grimm uses is in the 80s. And he, in the beginning chapter, he talks about a mayoral campaign in Chicago, in which Harold Washington, who went on to become the first black mayor, was running in the Democratic primary, and the entire Democratic machine backed somebody else. They even fly in Ted Kennedy, who's a big figure in the book in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
They fly him in to campaign against Harold Washington. And Jesse Jackson is on Team Washington. He's a clergyman from Chicago, and he really wants to see the first black mayor and advance some progressive causes. And he says, come on, like, what, Senator Kennedy, why are you doing this? And Kennedy has to say, well, it's an old family friend. I kind of have an obligation here to the Chicago Democratic Party, and Jackson's like, what do we, chop liver? The obligation stems back to 1960 when Chicago, the Daily Machine, basically stole the election for John F. Kennedy. They stuffed ballots and shit, got him elected. They beat Nixon at the time. So, so here's backing up a second, sorry. This is Maureen Dowd, who says in the pages of the New York Times, she's quoting her spin class, and on the screen in the spin class they put like quotes, inspirational quotes, and one of them is, you climb the mountain to see the world. You don't climb the mountain so the world can see you. I only wished AOC was cycling alongside me to hear it as well. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez encircled me, I don't know what the fuck that means, from the start. I love the bartender makes good Cinderella story, the shake-up, the capital idealistic dreams, the bravado about how the plutocrat president from Queens wouldn't know how to deal with a Puerto Rican girl from the Bronx. And I imagined the most potent feminist partnership in American history. Nancy Pelosi as sensei, bringing her inside game, and AOC, the Karate Kid, with a wicked Twitter game.
That sucks so hard.
That's what so many people thought.
Yeah, I remember reading all those tweets and like cringing real hard at them.
Because this is news to most of the American left, I would say. Maybe not most, but a huge chunk of the voting left. They think they're on the same page. Why would there be any... there would only be daylight between a Pelosi and an Ocasio-Cortez.
Well, a lot of people, sort of like are only sort of lazily engaged in politics and honestly like don't. I think that, most people, if they could really admit it, would probably come to the conclusion that this is like just kind of replacing whatever sports is for a lot of other people, And I say that because of like cable news having sort of just a sensational narrative to a lot of things. Most people aren't like, reading a lot of like really like in-depth theory and stuff like that. I mean, I have to force myself to. It's working now because I have like a fucking podcast where it's like, I make money off it and shit. It's a fucking hard thing to keep track of. So like, it's fucking frustrating, but it's also a byproduct of the way our society is set up, of like the alienation you have within liberalism under your own government and how you're not really directly, connected to anything. And so, like, it's inevitable that a bunch of dumb fucking people or a bunch of just disengaged people are going to think something like that. That is so frustrating for us living here in New York and having, like, been around, like, the AOC campaign. I was fucking keep track of that shit when it was happening, like, before she got elected and when she had a fucking rose emoji in her Twitter bio and everything. And, the same people that argued against a lot of the politics she's talking about and sort of framed everything as like what we're going to talk about here. Oh, it's too progressive or whatever. Now take credit for her like being a thing or whatever. And so it's a blood curdling sort of like leap of logic to watch someone go through.
Yeah. Well, I remember phone banking for her, and it was a pretty easy sell. Like I just said, I remember this one woman had never heard of her, like a lot of people, and she was just, I just said she's a young Latina woman who doesn't take any corporate money, and she wants to transform American politics, make it more based on people. We've got people, not the corporate dollars. And she was just like, sure, such an easy sell.
Yeah.
If you ask that, but I don't know, if you ask that same person about Nancy Pelosi, there's a good chance she thinks, oh yeah, same stuff.
Yeah,
she wants the same stuff.
Sure.
Maybe that's just me being sexist, but who knows?
Well, listen, we're definitely going to be sexist on this podcast, but I do think that like is symptomatic of a sort of haze or fatigue that people get because like during the great 2016 primary fucking the Great War, back then, I do remember a lot of people I was arguing with about Bernie and Hillary would say, well, they're the same, though, right? They want the same things. And you'd go, and I understand how they got to that conclusion because that's why they're so mad. They think, well, these two things are exactly the same. Therefore, this person just likes the one that's a guy. That must be the deciding factor. And then you would go, the whole reason that this argument is happening is because I don't see these two things as the same.
Right.
I'm paying attention to the fucking politics,
Yeah. No, it's because I don't want to be labeled an anti-Semite. That's why. But it's got to privilege one over the other.
It's really funny because we never extend these sort of arguments over to like Republicans, Yeah. It would be crazy to be like, what? They're all the same, right? But like if they're all Democrats, I mean.
Right.
I guess, it was just this weird assumption that we have that they're all the same.
Yeah. And that's what I think one of the huge positive things about Bernie's 26 candidacy is it illuminated this sort of hemorrhage that always existed, but that was kind of under the surface, that most people who didn't really pay close attention to this stuff were just completely unaware of, that there might be a pretty stark ideological difference between members of the Democratic Party as well as the base and the leadership. Because you ask, I think, honestly, most people voting for Joe Biden, if you ask them, do you want universal health care and a Green New Deal, a lot of them would say, yeah. A lot of the same people supporting Hillary Clinton probably would have said the same thing. I remember when Obama was president, when he was running, when I was a teenager, people assumed he was for that stuff.
Yeah.
They assumed he was, we'll get all the troops out of Iraq, we'll pass universal health care, which intuitively just means, free health care like every other fucking country.
Yeah.
People don't really, and I remember that was a big revelation for me as I was starting to get interested in this stuff, is I would hear politicians saying universal health care. It was like, oh, so like a government-run system. And then I remember reading just the New York Times had this layout of all the politicians' different plans. And I was like, wait, there's nobody except for Dennis Kucinich who actually wants this, who wants a full, government-run system.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's existed for a long time, that tension, and that's what this book is about. So back to the 80s, the Chicago machine, after Harold Washington pretty narrowly wins the Democratic primary, backs the Republican against him. So forget the spoiler thing, third party. They're going full other side.
Yeah.
And Jesse Jackson is witnessing all of this.
Wait, I'm sorry. He won the primary?
Harold Washington. who became mayor of Chicago, won the Democratic primary.
He was the one that the Democrats were not supporting.
Right.
Okay, so he won the primary, so the only way for the machine to oppose him is to go with the Republicans. Okay, I follow.
Yep. So Jackson sees all of this, and at the time there's sort of a the Democratic Party is kind of in having some.
I like the idea of a bunch of mobsters like, "Hey, we're Republicans now."
Yeah. Give me that elephant cigar. So Jackson is saying that the progressive left in America needs to run a presidential candidate in 1984, and they need to run a black presidential candidate. Because at the time, and Grimm goes through this in the book, there's some different constituencies. There's old labor Democrats who are because during Vietnam, you had this weird thing where the left, it was just kind of all over the place. There were people like Johnson who were very, very progressive on government spending, on anti-poverty initiatives, on civil rights, and then were imperialist. He was, oversaw the war in Vietnam as well as the bombing of Cambodia somewhat. I think maybe that was next. Anyway. And then you have anti-war people. Eugene McCarthy. George McGovern, who people always point to as the reason the Democrats can't run a left-wing candidate is because McGovern got swamped in 1972, absolutely obliterated. But what they don't mention is that he was pretty anti-labor. He was very anti-war, and he did support some food stamps and stuff, but he did not have the backing of the labor unions. And some of that was his fault, but it was also the labor unions were run by people like George Meany, very apropos last name. The guy refused to back, he was the head of AFL-CIO, and refused to back McGovern, which at the time...
Yeah,
unions,
it wasn't just him. It was also the AFL-CIO refusing to back him that also just led to that not working.
Right. And there were unions back then, as opposed to now, where a huge get-out-the-vote operation. That's if you're a Democrat, that's how you win, is with the help of unions.
Well, especially back then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so he didn't stand a chance, and you also had more and more Democrats going into the 80s who were anti-interventionist, but also neoliberal. It was kind of this weird thing, which today, and that's why I really think one of the reasons I think Bernie is so exciting is because, and Jackson was too, is because he's uniting all of these different left-wing causes. People point to Roosevelt as being the sort of left-wing savior, FDR, and it's true, on New Deal, great. But at the same time, he was also pro-oil industry, obviously the internment of the Japanese Americans. And that's because it's only relatively recently that the two parties have become ideologically coherent. It was just a mishmash of different interest groups on either side.
Did you listen to the Christmas thing about that?
Yes.
Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah. So in the 80s, Jackson wants to mobilize the disenfranchised people, a lot of people of color in America, in addition to poor people and progressive whites. He wants to do the Rainbow Coalition, which we have covered on the show before. And it's a little hard to say what was going on with Jackson the man, because, as we talked about, he's a bit full of himself. So Jackson runs 1984, gets in pretty late, and runs on a very progressive platform. He wants gay rights, single payer, free community college. He talks about reparations for descendants of slaves. And he wants to redirect the attention on the war on drugs, which is in really at its height in the 80s. He wants to redirect the attention to the banks that are setting up the money laundering instead of the on-the-street criminals. Mondale wins the primary. He does not win the general election. And he campaigns on, and this is another straw man that they bring up that, or not a straw man, just like a dumb, easily refutable argument that Mondale was ran as this lefty loon, and we needed a more progressive, a more centrist nominee, and then we would have stand a better chance against Reagan. He ran, applauding, this is from Ryan Grimm, applauding Reagan's invasion of Grenada, saying he'd be tougher than Reagan on the Soviet Union, and promising to cut spending and attack the deficit. The only promise he made that was traditionally associated with liberal Democrats was to raise taxes. And Mondale here says, by the end of my first term, I will reduce the Reagan budget deficit to 2/3. He vowed during his acceptance speech to the Congress, my message is we must cut taxes and pay as we go. And there's this quote from, I think, one of the debates where Reagan's complaining about Democrats wanting to raise taxes. And Mondale says, like, well, we got to balance the budget here. And he even says, Reagan, hypocrite, he's going to raise your taxes. Here's the difference. We're both going to raise your taxes. I'm going to tell you the truth. I just did. I just told you that I'm going to raise your taxes. So, as you can imagine, not a hugely, wildly successful strategy there.
Okay.
Basically, the worst of both worlds. We were going to cut spending and raise taxes.
Yeah,
we're gonna take away stuff that helps
liberal,
you.
Socially conservative.
Yeah. So Mondale only wins Minnesota, and I'm sorry to the folks back home who still stand Walt, but gotta bear the bad news. Yeah, I mean, he was fucking Carter's vice president. So just 4 years prior, this guy had been routed by Ronald Reagan, and we're going to nominate someone from his cabinet, like instead of doing a clean break. It doesn't even have to be with Jackson, although that would have been my preference, but at least somebody who's going to give you something new. Because Carter, we look back on him with sort of rosy eye shades when you compare him, of course, to Republican presidents, but also to Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, because in many ways, especially on foreign policy, Carter was more of a progressive. But his administration was vehemently anti-labor. There's a quote from someone in his cabinet who says they want the UAW to, quote-unquote, feel pain. They thought the unions had too much power in Washington. They looked at them like all other special interests. And was a deficit hawk, and he began deregulation. There's a lot of there's some deregulation, like the airline stuff, that was good because there was because it was very tightly regulated, and that was making prices high and just was shitty. So he deregulated the airlines. That was good, but he started deregulating the banks, and really Reagan, as Ryan Grimm points out, just picked up on a trend that Carter started and extended beyond him.
Can I ask you a question about Carter? This is kind of my take on him, but I'm also not a fucking huge historian and huge wonk or whatever. But I mean, he almost seems like, in a lot of ways, because he kind of fizzled out, and also was associated with a lot more progressive stuff on his face, that he then did a disservice to some of the identity of being like a more progressive Democrat, because it almost like the Obama effect, where it's like, I don't know the Obama effect, but the fact that he didn't fulfill a lot of shit then makes people weary, the next time someone like that comes around.
Because he would, I
would say he disappointed his constituents, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that's fair, but because so Carter ran a very vague campaign. He was a Southern evangelical, and he would say, and I think we said this in the Matt Christman episode, that he said, they would ask him, well, hey, what's your foreign policy? And he said, we need a foreign policy that's as good as the American people. That was it. It was just this platitudinous, vague shit. So another big character in the book is Mr. Rahm Emmanual, who is also from Chicago.
He's married to Rahm Emmanual.
Yeah.
Mr. Rahm Emmanual. Okay.
I mean, kinda. He's pretty full of himself. He's the villain, for sure, in this fucking thing. He comes sort of out of movement politics in Chicago, but has to make a decision. Do I pursue that, or do I pursue the electoral route? And has several internships and stuff within the Democratic Party. And at one point, I think volunteers for the IDF, goes to Israel to fight some people. So he mailed he's basically talks about how Rahm is an asshole and is proudly a dick to people and is loud, swears a lot. That's a well-known thing about Rahm Emmanuel, is he has a filthy mouth. But Grimm's point is that this is kind of bluster, because after he's done screaming at you, he really doesn't know he's an idiot. He fucks up a lot and gives people what they want, as long as they're to his right. He loves making concessions to the right. He doesn't do it to the left, but he is equally probably mean to right-wingers, but he will let them have what they want. There's a scene in the book where he's really mad at the Blue Dogs for kind of undermining Obama during the healthcare debate.
Yeah.
And he's like screaming at them, swearing at them, flipping a shit. And then afterwards he's like, okay, but you can have your meeting with Obama and we'll put in that amendment for you.
Yeah.
So just give it away. And there's a story about him sending a dead fish to one of his rivals.
What does that even mean?
I don't know. So he got mad at his pollster for losing him an election in 1988, and so he sends him a dead fish, which the pollster says is quote unquote bogus and had more to do with money. And he complains that Emmanuel was like giving away gigs to his fucking cronies, and so Ryan Grimm writes, far from being an example of Emmanuel's steely-eyed ruthlessness, Rahm's touchstone anecdote merely exposes him as one more party hack doling out cash to friends, losing in the process, and going after anybody who speaks up. So throughout the Clinton years, he helps do things like pass NAFTA. He's just like a party bigwig. And then he finally gets elected to Congress in 2002. And he does it on a pro-war platform. And then, because he's so damn good at raising money, Pelosi makes him the head of the DCCC in 2006.
This is like a Tarantino movie. All these horrible characters keep being introduced.
Yeah. There should be a movie about him getting beat up. It should be like Inglourious Bastards, but instead of Nazis, it's like Occupy. I don't know.
Yeah, dude. It's about Antifa, the real Nazis.
Yeah.
Or no, I'm sorry. Antifa is the Inglourious Bastards in this scenario. Whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
But yeah, what I'm saying is, these people suck. That's it.
That he does.
I was just imagining Rahm Emmanuel's name flying across the screen and like blaxploitation music playing. Like funk.
Right. So his mantra in 2006 is money, money, money. He says to the staffers, the first third of your campaign is money, money, money. The second third is money, money, and money. And the last third is votes, press, and money. And Grimm points out, notice that field organizing, door knocking, having an inspiring message, all the things that got AOC elected,
Yeah.
they don't make it onto the list. And he says in 2006, he tells all the people he plucks, and a lot of them are veterans, people who served in Iraq in the military. And one of his confidants says that they love the idea, they just love the image of these macho military people beating Republicans. They're just kind of obsessed fanboys of that imagery. And they recruit a lot of fairly right-wing people because they're veterans to run for Congress. And this is it appears to be successful. And there's a book that comes out called The Thumpin', which is all about how Rahm Emmanuel just beat the Republicans in 2006 in this wave. What they don't acknowledge is that the wave could have been a fucking tsunami. It could have, drowned all of the Republicans in Congress. They really could have taken a lot of more people out. But they want to run to the middle. And in the beginning, Rahm Emmanuel says that don't say you're against the Iraq War, say you want a quote-unquote new direction in Iraq.
Yeah.
Be vague about it. Then one of the few times he's acknowledged he was wrong is that actually didn't work out too well. And they were doing better when they ran against the war, when they had a clear, comprehensible message. So there's a lot of examples here about how Emmanuel, people would come to him and say, for instance, there's a politician in North Carolina who was named Miller, and he was like a local politician, local state senator, I believe. And Emmanuel says, "No, fuck that. We need a veteran. Fuck that guy." So they recruit some guy who, one of his first speeches when he's trying to run the Democratic primaries, he's saying that like abortion leads to promiscuity and he's like anti-gay and all this stuff that just doesn't float with primary voters, even in North Carolina.
Sure.
And they try to go back to this Miller guy, and they say, "Look, sorry, we're wrong. You can run. And he says, "I'm not going to now." And so they end up nominating the school teacher, who goes on to be elected. So he does win as a Democrat. Actually, no, he loses that year. He loses, and Miller probably would have won. And then in 2008, he is elected, and goes on to be a thorn in the Democratic caucus's side. So he votes against Obamacare and all these liberal initiatives. And if they had nominated Miller, not only would he have won in 2006, he would have been a reliable vote. So he shot himself in the foot there. The top 3 recipients of DCCC money in 2006 running for Congress all lost. There's a lot more examples. Yarmouth, John Hall of Hall & Oates, people who Emmanuel wrote off as being kooky. They were too left-wing, and they won without his help. There are even more who came extremely close and didn't win because he didn't want to help them. So I would encourage everybody, if you're going to read one chapter, read The Political Genius. If you're hanging around in a bookstore, just pick up We've Got People, read chapter 6, and memorize these statistics, because they're, a lot of, because to me, the most important takeaway for any of this stuff when you're arguing with centrists is to yank the argument away that they are more electable, that a centrist is more electable. It's not true. Bill Clinton won in 1992 and 1996 because Ross Perot was in the race. There's very little historical precedent for centrist Democrats winning elections.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, they use Clinton as sort of a reference point.
Yeah.
And yeah, there are things you can analyze about that race that, I mean, I guess the way I think a centrist looks at Clinton is that was probably a point in history where just no Democrat could possibly win again unless they sort of went talking around both sides of their mouths around the country the way he sort of did, and and then therefore you have to be this tricky neoliberal or whatever. And then like you said, the other thing that they always use is this reference point of McGovern having been this huge disaster, but these are specific races that have all these factors that don't get really brought in, and it's just not, it's not true when you look at it a million other races and a million other smaller things.
And at the presidential level, you had Barack Obama, who, say what you will about him when he became president, but in a way wasn't exactly running a moderate campaign. That's okay. Yeah, that's a good point I want to bring up, is because, so also in more recent history, fucking everyone's just acting like Hillary didn't lose, and she fucking did. It was this huge fucking thing. Obama is an example of someone who ran on more progressive shit and then just didn't do it when he got into office. Right. So that proves that people will vote for something if they think that that it's actually going to happen. And then fucking first and foremost, everyone should be looking at the fact that
Donald fucking Trump won.
Yeah.
Saying he was going to build a wall he hasn't built and shit.
Electability means nothing.
All this shit. You don't have to do any of the shit that you were going to said you were going to do, man. You know?
Right.
So there's, I would call bullshit anytime someone says, you can't promise people a pie in the sky or whatever. I mean, you literally can. No one will check whether you actually did it, you know? But also it would be cool if you meant it too, you know?
Yeah. Real quick, apologies to Rick Glazier. I just mixed up Miller and Rick Glazier. That was the progressive guy who would have won, and Miller was the veteran idiot. I'm an idiot.
They're going to be so pissed.
So, meanwhile, you have the rise of MoveOn.org, which actually started in 1998 during the Clinton impeachment, but really took off during the Bush years. So you have this online left that's beginning in the mid-2000s, and a big linchpin for it was Howard Dean. Now, as Ryan Grimm makes very clear in the book, Howard Dean himself, not a very progressive guy. Now we know him as the corporate stooge who goes on MSNBC and trashes the left. But
I remember him from The Scream.
Yeah, which is that guy who was presented was cool. I liked that guy who was this raged... fired up progressive. Yeah.
I sound like a witch.
But yeah, he was governor of Vermont, very left-wing state. Because he was not in Congress, didn't vote for the Iraq War, and so he had the luxury of saying that he would have been against it. I find that sort of dubious. And he talked about healthcare. He did not talk about single-payer health care.
That's definitely like I would have kicked your ass if I was there, dude.
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
Right. I'm sure he would have voted for the war.
If I wasn't on probation right now, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So because of those sort of mostly image-based symbolic things, all this anti-Bush energy gets channeled into the Dean campaign. It flounders. But even though the candidate was bad and would have went on to disappoint the left badly had he been elected, there is this infrastructure that begins in 2003, 2004, the online model of campaigning. Dean didn't really understand this so much. It was bloggers, people like that who supported him. And Netroots Nation started, which is now kind of, in some ways has changed, but more so, I think, the left has just gotten more left and outpaced it. But you have all these factors coming into play, and so that becomes a big point of organizing against Bush and going into the Obama era. So Harry Reid, who was not the most left-wing senator, starts adopting more progressive policies because he realizes that that's where the energy is that's where the activists are. They're online. And so he gets people in his office who come right out of the grassroots. And so during his career, Harry Reid is actually kind of an ally to the Pod Damn Americas of the world because he, for one, he was pretty instrumental in getting the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. He really fought for a public option. He fought for a strong banking bill. But a lot of these things were undermined, not necessarily by Obama, but the Obama administration, namely Rahm motherfucking Emmanual. So, right when Obama comes into office, we all remember there was seething anger at the banks. People were absolutely livid. And at the time, there was bonuses. There were bonuses that went out to all these banks that had just crashed the global economy. And I remember this, seeing on the news, people, all walks of life, all different political persuasions were livid with this shit. They had just received billions of dollars in bailout money, and they're giving themselves fucking bonuses.
Yeah.
Chuck Grassley, a Republican from Iowa, said that the bankers should do a Japanese style, I think it was, and they should either resign or commit suicide. So Geithner, of course, is Obama's Treasury Secretary. Because I think Obama raised so much money from Wall Street, a lot of them went into his cabinet. He had ties to the financial service industry. Geithner, who I don't think had... He was a public official, but was still very friendly with Wall Street. and Rahm Emmanuel as well, worked in banking. And they thought that there were, quote-unquote, constitutional issues with a clawback, meaning they didn't think it was... They had a philosophical objection to the government seizing that money, seizing the bonus money, or taxing it at a high rate. They didn't think that was right because of their weird legal reasoning. So this is Chris Dodd talking about that experience. Dodd, who was on the Senate Banking Committee, he says he recalls very vividly going to some meeting in the basement of a garage, and my old friend Rahm Emmanuel, he spent 15 minutes working for me in 1992. We had a shouting match. Rahm was arguing very strenuously that he wanted the whole provision out, and I vehemently disagreed. Anyway, the administration didn't give up, and unbeknown to me entirely, they convinced a person on the staff to delete a section of that sentence of the amendment. I never knew about it. So Emmanuel got one of his lackeys to go in and just delete the fucking part that said we were going to take the bonuses back.
Wow.
Yeah.
Shitty.
Yeah, and there's a big push at the time to nationalize. This was such a golden fucking opportunity that the Obama administration squandered. I mean, from their perspective, they didn't squander it because that's, they saved it. They saved the institution of too big to fail banks.
But there was a push to nationalize...
Yeah, people...
Just banks?
Alan Greenspan, Mr. Free Market, was talking about... He said it wouldn't be a bad idea to actually nationalize the fucking banks that are getting the bailout money.
Jesus Christ. I don't remember that because, I was probably, fucking drunk or something for that entire year. But, yeah, damn. That is crazy to think because it's fairly recently and it's, in the memory of our lives. And now it is something that people say, it's a bridge too far.
Right. Yeah, so Obama, I don't think he wants to go that far, but he is, he wants to do something. And Christina Romer, who's one of the more progressive members of Obama's economic team, and actually Larry Summers, who's a bad dude, he sucks, they did say that they wanted to split the financial institutions into quote-unquote good banks and bad banks. So the bad bank would separate out the toxic assets, putting them in a publicly run institution, and it would be freed from pressure to foreclose the mortgages, which were far underwater, and they could be renegotiated with the homeowner. So that would help slow foreclosures, would have got the housing market back on track, and it would have been a quote-unquote lifeline for the millions of people who are caught in the crisis, and a sign also that Obama was serious about this. So Obama says, look, we got to do this. I'm sick of dragging our feet here. We got to take action. And he says to his economic squad, look, I'm going to get a haircut and have dinner with my family. You've heard me. When I come back, I want this issue resolved. So Obama leaves the room. Then Rahm Emmanuel says, everyone shut the fuck up. Let me be clear. Taking down the banking system in a program that could cost $700 billion is a fantasy. Listen, it's not going to fucking happen. We have no fucking credibility, so give it up. The job of everyone in this room is to move the president when he gets back toward a solution that works.
Oh, he's a Tarantino character.
Yeah. Just a fucking...
Everybody suck my dick.
So he is personally responsible for millions of people losing their homes.
Yeah.
He's just been a constant thorn in the side of anything cool Obama kind of wanted to do. So the public option, when that was kind of floundering for a bit, he goes through pretty thoroughly about that process of the public option being a part of the healthcare, it going away, then it came back again when there were actual senators who were on board because the House didn't think they could pass it. And there's a petition that goes out where, there are a few senators, Democratic senators, who were signing a pledge that they wanted healthcare reform to include a public option. Rahm Emmanuel, who is missing one of his middle fingers from a deli accident when he was a teenager, he has a meeting with a couple of these people at a restaurant and gives them a double bird.
With one stump.
With one of the stump, yeah.
That fucking rules. He sucks, but it's funny.
Yeah.
It's funny that happened.
So, yeah, of course, it's so... That part of the book is really hard to read, just seeing how badly they squandered this shit and seeing how Emmanuel has gotten away scot-free. He went on to be mayor of Chicago, was reelected, and then he decided not to run again, and he would have had to face all the awful shit he's done with murder from the Chicago Police Department, covering up a fucking murder of a black kid. He's gotten away with it. But meanwhile, you do have an online left, which is small, but it is getting more and more vocal as the Obama administration's true colors start to come out, and they want a banking bill. It's been a year at this point since the financial crisis, and in many ways sort of a tactical mistake to not do that before healthcare reform. I don't think that made a ton of sense. It took a fucking year to get the ACA passed, during which time there was like a pretty big consensus that you needed to do something on regulations pretty quickly with banks. So the House of Representatives, because of Rahm Emmanuel, is so thoroughly filled with pro-banking Democrats that the version of a banking bill that they pass is actually to the right of what the Senate wants, which is like unheard of. Usually the House is where the good stuff gets going, and then the Senate is where it goes to cool down. Yeah. But in this case, there were even Republicans who were like, wait a minute, we need something better than this. And they managed to pass Dodd-Frank in 2010, which includes, despite the protestations of people like Timothy Geithner, a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is going to be headed, a lot of people's preference, is going to be headed by Elizabeth Warren. So she had been, because of Harry Reid, because of his connection to the grassroots, had tapped her to oversee the TARP bailout money. And she said, when she got in there, she's like, look, we need some sort of agency to protect people from these predatory lenders. So they were going to make her head of it, but a lot of people don't want that. Also, in the meantime, you also have, during the ACA fight, Ted Kennedy dies. They lose the seat in Massachusetts to this guy, Scott Brown, who, and when he wins against Martha Coakley, who was Massachusetts Attorney General, who decides to go on vacation right after she wins her primary because she just thinks she has this thing in the bag. 80% of the people who don't vote in that election, who had voted for Obama, 80% of the combination of people who did not vote and people who went from Obama to Scott Brown, 80% of them said they wanted a public option in the healthcare bill.
All right.
So, again, we got to drive home this reality that people like policies that benefit their lives. It's political malpractice. Anyway, so Warren does not become the chairwoman of the CFPB, but thanks to this online organization, she gets drafted to run for Senate. She does it. 2011, she beats Scott Brown, and a lot of the infrastructure that went on to help the Bernie Sanders campaign in 2016 started with Warren, because there was a campaign, Draft Warren. She didn't run in 2016, so all those emails just went to Bernie. So this is, as we're kind of rounding out here, I think one of the interesting aspects of this book is the Warren-Bernie divide, in Grimm's view, is a little bit overhyped, because Bernie had been in politics for a while. He had been in the House of Representatives. He had been in the Senate. He helped form the House Progressive Caucus, which went on to be pretty big, and so it included a lot of the Nancy Pelosi's of the world. It sort of watered down the thing. It's not like he started a Democratic Socialist Caucus, right, which at the time would have just been him, but he didn't consolidate.
This is a nerd that made a one-man club.
Yeah. He didn't consolidate the little clout that he did have among people. And Warren was pretty different in Grimm's view. She said at the time that the CFPB was up for a vote that she either wanted a strong Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, she either wanted that, or she wanted a quote-unquote lot of blood and teeth on the floor, is what she said. So the Progressive Caucus, meanwhile, is like pushing for this stuff a strong banking bill, CFPB, public option, but they're not able to like get their members to commit to it, to be a counterweight to the Blue Dogs. And this is in part because there's a split between the two chairs of the Progressive Caucus. You have Lynn Woolsey, who is progressive, but she doesn't want to work with outside groups. She doesn't want to work with people who will mobilize activists, voters to call their members of Congress and that stuff. There's actually a story in the book about how, I think it's during the early fights for the ACA, the Obama for America list sends emails out to people who say, like, hey, show up to your member of Congress's town meeting and tell them what to do. And there are a couple of members of Congress who are like, offended at that. They're like, how dare you, like, sick your fucking plebes on us.
Yeah.
And they backed off. It basically dissolved the organizing Obama's organization that he'd started during his campaign, went on to be Organizing for America. It was put on the DNC and kind of gutted. But you have a lot of energy still on the grassroots, and you have a co-chair of the House Progressive Caucus in Raul Grijalva, who wants to utilize that. He wants to use all this grassroots energy. The problem is Grijalva, who has had a background in community organizing. He had worked with Dolores de la Huerta. He's a solid guy, was, I believe, the first member of Congress to endorse Bernie in 2016. He also is drunk 70% of the time. That's a big part of the book. The book actually opens in Tune In, which is a bar right next to the Capitol, and there's a party going on after they pass the ACA, and Joe Crowley is buying people shots. He's with a bunch of lobbyists, and they're like patting themselves on the back for how good this is going to be for the insurance industry.
Yeah.
And Raul Grijalva is just sitting in the corner of the beer and a shot. And at one point, Ryan Grimm is talking to somebody who's like, yeah, Raul's like always at Tune In. He's like a regular there. And and the guy's like, no, he's not. There's no member of Congress that's a regular at a bar right next to the Capitol. And he says, are you sure? Like, look at Raul Grijalva. And this guy was like, oh, I didn't know he was a member of Congress. I just thought he hung out here. I just thought he was a random guy.
He's doing the Bukowski to all my friends.
Yeah. He gets, right, he slams shots of whiskey and then writes progressive legislation on a typewriter.
like Bukowski. Yeah.
All right, almost done here. So basically, if I stopped reading, I read a lot for 3 days. I'm at page 229 where they go to the present situation in AOC. But up until then, there's marginal left in the United States, marginal reformist left. And it's mostly through groups like MoveOn.org, Daily Kos, and stuff like that, Firedog Lake. They are able to raise some issues, but they are not like really grounded in real life in communities, and they are not that, I guess, politically, to put it charitably, doctrinaire. They don't have a strong like theoretical grounding in. They're capitalists. They're liberals, and so now we have an opportunity to where the country is much more open to left wing ideas, and the grassroots is a lot more left-wing, and I think that's in part thanks to Bernie Sanders. I think I tweeted about this the other day. The fact that it was Bernie who ran in 2016 and not Warren was a huge boost to the radical left, because if Warren had run, I think there's a good chance she would have won.
Yeah.
But nobody would be talking about socialism. The mere fact that Sanders calls himself a socialist opens up a huge new terrain of thought and debate.
Yeah, I mean, the most important thing that Bernie did is probably just open up that terrain. And, I mean, we're a bunch of fucking radical leftists. We're not...
Yeah.
Our main thing isn't always the presidential race anyways, so it's not going to go away no matter who wins.
Yeah.
My worry is that she gets into office... she's called a socialist anyway from the right. People on the left that aren't paying much attention, like liberals and stuff, think that's socialism, and then she isn't able to accomplish certain things, and that then collectively moves the the conventional wisdom, the collective idea, not for us, but on the main American stage of what socialism is like back. Like, I think she might undo what Bernie did if we're like, that's socialism, and then it didn't fucking work, and then people go, well, okay, how about something else? Things might swing in the other direction. But, what the fuck do I know?
Well, but the fact that she says she's not a socialist will, I think, illustrate that, like, this isn't socialism, and her faults, if she's elected, the shortcomings, I think, will be for a lack of socialist politics. The fact that she, and in all fairness, Bernie is not in favor of this either, is not willing to actually nationalize and expropriate the banks. They just want to regulate them, or in Bernie's case, break them up. A socialist would say you got to seize them, you got to take control of them, make them publicly owned assets.
Yeah.
Another thing,
people called Obama a socialist.
Yeah, exactly. Which is a gift.
Okay.
The fact that
I guess that was before what you're talking about with Bernie changing everything, and
but I think like they've yelled socialist so many times. It's like the boogeyman isn't that scary anymore. He's in the room. He's here. He's hanging out. He's not eating you.
Yeah, and there's just younger voters also every race.
Yeah, definitely. But one of the, and I guess to close with this, one of the benefits too, I think, to Bernie, from my perspective, as somebody who had to take 2 showers before I registered as a Democrat, is he's not really a Democrat. I mean, that's kind of the truth. Like, he's independent, and what we need, I do believe, is a restructuring of the electoral system. I don't know that that's going to happen, but from a sort of, it's a question of perspective. The party system. A lot of socialists, and I'm sure there are a lot of leftists who are not going to like this book, which, by the way, one of the reasons is it throws around leftist a lot. Scoop Jackson, senator from Washington, was not a leftist, as he's called. Like, I am not one of these no true Scotsman people who are like, oh, you're only a leftist if you agree with my revolutionary edict 99 or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think we toss it around a little too much. Like, if you're an elected official in the United States, chances are you're not really a leftist. You probably believe in some form of state capitalism. But that being said, the mission to create an independent working class party is one that goes back a long time in the United States, and it's a laudable one. But I think we too often apply the rhetoric from back then to today, where the definition of party from that time. Because if you're viewing a party as a ballot line, then the Democrats are a capitalist party. But if you're viewing a party as the base of support, the infrastructure, the fundraising mechanisms, it's split. It's a nebulous thing. And our organization that we're in, DSA, has a chance to be a party without a party. So we will use the Democratic ballot line in most cases. But I have yet to see a convincing argument about how that will somehow suck us into the fold of the establishment. That could happen, but there's nothing. People talk about this in very metaphysical terms, like by voting Democrat, something weird Hegelian thing is happening, and we're being infiltrated by this capitalist party. It's like, and I asked this to Ryan Grimm when I went to his book talk on earlier this week. Does he think that using the Democratic ballot line should be a stepping stone to a full third party? And he basically said, look, this is until you rewrite the parliamentary laws and create a different system, it's just going to be 2 parties. The question is, how would a new party be any different from the old one? You slap a new name on it, you still have those divisions, those factions, and as he said, you got to have that fight anyway. These are people. If you run with on a non-democratic ballot line, you're still going to have to fight establishment Democrats. So you might as well have it on their own turf. And he has an interesting perspective too, because he kind of came up during the anti-globalization movement, which was this very sort of tenuous alliance between anarchists and Social Democrats, which is, I guess, the box I would put Ryan Grimm in, because you had the Cold War ending, so nobody really wanted to embrace socialism even in the late 90s. So you had full-on, we need insurrection revolution, or we need social democracy, sort of just a more progressive version of what the Democrats wanted. And a lot of those votes went to Nader. I asked him about Nader. He said that, look, you're shooting yourself in the foot. If Nader had run in a Democratic primary, we might be living in a fucking different world. But he chose not to because of this weird relationship with his father, who told him to never join one of the two parties. So back then, the Bible, as he puts it, of like sort of the anti-globalization movement was no logo. It's like, we got to oppose brands. That's intrinsically part of this like awful exploitative system, are brands. And today, kids understand not only that socialism is something we should embrace, but brands aren't necessarily bad. It's like, we don't need to have no logo, just like, as he puts it, good logo.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So, like, yeah, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing inherently about a brand that's shitty. It's like, you can have a socialist brand.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we're seeing now.
Oof, man. Okay, that just made me think about a ton of shit. But we are so far.
Yeah.
Yeah. That always kind of bugged me about millennials and Zoomers, is that they are so comfortable with a lot of corporate concepts and a lot of like the brand culture and shit. But I also think I'm being a crotchety old punk in that time. Like, no, we were all supposed to be against the entirety of this, and now I'm learning from my younger friends a little bit that, yeah, like what you just said, this is work within it because it's a reality or something.
Or,
I'm like a Gen X culture jammer or whatever.
Right. Yeah, which is a brand. That was a brand.
Yeah.
No, I mean, as Naomi Klein famously said, she is a brand. She just hopes to be a crappy one. How about we make a brand that's for fucking an egalitarian society?
What was her book about that?
No logo.
Oh, No Logo. Oh, yeah. Right.
Yeah, it's got a good brand. And this is a great brand.
No logo.
Look at this logo. It's nice. It's a red sign. Black font.
Yeah, I mean, we have a logo. Fuck.
Yeah.
We're a brand. Fuck.
We're a brand. It's okay. It's okay to be a brand.
All right. Well, my brain's kind of fried from podcasting all day. Do you have any final thoughts on this? I'll just try and follow what you're talking about.
Basically, we gotta just rob the electability argument from the centrists. Rob the pragmatic argument from the centrists. Point out to them, show them, drive the point home that they are the idealists, they are the pie-in-the-skyers, they are not in touch with reality.
All right, I like it. Hardcore AndersLee. I think this is like an evergreen. So
who knows?
Fuck it, I don't know.
Maybe this will come up when Elizabeth Warren is president.
Patreon. Sign up for the Patreon.
Yeah.
For free shit. Not for free shit. Once you pay for it, it's
Unless
free.
this is on Patreon already. Who knows?
Who knows where this will end up? Yeah. I'll just add shit onto it. Okay. All right, bye.